Welcome to the Creative Agency Success Show, the go-to resource for agency owners looking to scale their business. Join us every week to stay ahead of the curve and position your agency for future success.
So question I want to ask on this is, so a lot of times when I talk with agencies and I talk with clients, we talk about hiring that salesperson or that business development person. And the question comes up, do I hire someone who's really good and understands our product and teach them to sell? Or do I hire a really good salesperson and then teach them about our product? So I'm curious what your thoughts on that are.
I'm going to say it depends on your definition of really good at sales. So because if someone's really good at sales, in the old-fashioned sense, I don't think you want to hire them because I think they're going to damage your reputation as an organization, right? You're going to spend a lot of money. You're not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy. And the people who you're dealing with are not going to be happy. So I would rather that you take someone who really understands your value proposition, the result of what you do. They don't even have to understand how you do it. Mm-hmm. They just really have to understand what problem you solve. They can understand a little bit about the how. They don't even have to be in the weeds, but they're really good people, right? That they're curious. They're curious minded. They're giving. And they're genuinely curious. So they're not just asking the questions so that they can tick off the list and then pitch. They really are curious and they understand this can take time, this takes research, it takes all sorts of things, but it's that personability thing that is what people buy.
And I'm curious to you on this question, Jody. So I know we recently hired or brought in someone that's doing our sales. And I think that's the number one thing she's really good at is she's been asking all the leaders, asking people is, okay, what do we bring to the organizations? What are we looking for? I mean, Jody, would you agree that's kind of what, I know for a while, it was hard for you to hire a salesperson. And I think this is probably why. Is this kind of what made you sign off on Christy?
Yeah. Because of all the different hats that I've worn in the company from leading, the production side to, marketing to you name it, the hat that was the hardest for me was the sales side, because the sales side is really the key to everything else working. You got to have clients coming in the door. So clients got to come in the door and they've got to come in with the right expectation. And that's really important to set. Otherwise, everything else you're setting everybody else up for failure. Otherwise, if you're saying our onboarding is going to take 2 weeks and it takes 2 months and we're high-fiving because we did a good job, but the client's expectations are different, that's setting us up for a disappointed client, no matter what the true experience should have been, to begin with. And so I think that's the part of the sales process that was super hard for me to understand and know, because I did talk to a lot of people. And do we hire a salesperson? Do we just hire within and promote one of our CFOs to a salesperson? What do we do? And it wasn't until I ran across the person that we have in that position right now, Christy. She's doing a great job, and she has a lot of background in sales, but not just in sales, but in management, company, management of other companies, and in some bigger companies, and her big superpower really is her follow through. Her ability to understand everything and just follow through, which was probably if I'm going to call it my own weaknesses, probably one of my weaknesses was the follow through part. And the fact that she's constantly asking questions, trying to learn what we do. She wants to be at the events that we're talking at, knowing that she's not going to speak, but just kind of hearing what we have to say. And I think that's the important thing that she brings to the table, is that she knows that she doesn't know everything, but she's willing to learn and willing to understand. And if I were to ask her today in one of her quarterly reviews, hey, what would you ideally like to be? I guarantee you she'd say, I want to be a thought leader like you. I want to be able to get up there and talk. And that's what, that's what really kind of sold me on the fact that, hey, I think we got the right person for that. Now time will tell, obviously, as that person matures through the organization, but so far she's doing a really good job. And I think I can see that on the onboarding side when clients come aboard. I think their expectations are in line to where they need to be.
That's really great. It's rare, but it sounds like she comes to that naturally, which is great, right?
Very natural. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is really, hard to find.
I think it is tough to
Yeah.
teach people curiosity, in my opinion, right? Like I think
Sure.
you either you meet people that are curious or you don't. And I think the other way to teach, the only one way I've ever found to teach curiosity is to put someone in a situation of something they really love doing, right? When it's something you love doing, the people are naturally going to ask questions. Where it's like if you threw someone that isn't naturally curious into like a car mechanic's office and like they've never driven, they don't care about cars, it's not their thing, they're not going to ask questions. Where a natural curious person is just going to be like, wonder how that works, or I wonder how that's working. But I think like
Right.
that's the only way really to, in my opinion, to teach someone to be curious is to put them in an area they're passionate about.
I think you're probably right about that. One of the things that I say is our mantra has to be, I don't know. Because what we do is we go into the situation believing that we know how our solution is going to help them. And we could be right, but that limits what we learn. So if we go into every situation with, I don't know, then I don't think it really necessarily matters where we go. We're always seeking to understand. We're always seeking information because we know there's the good possibility we don't know a lot of things that we need to understand.
I will say I do have kind of a philosophy that your calls should be warm calls. If you're cold calling and doing what I call is like the shotgun approach to sales, like I'm just going to send out 5,000 emails and word vomit all over people and tell them why they need me. That's not going to work. To me, that's a huge waste of time. The piece that often is missing. And I teach a 5-step process to a sales conversation. I call it the selling staircase. I wrote my 3rd book around it. Mm-hmm. And step 2 in the selling staircase is what's known as creating curiosity. This is the most missed step in the sales process. And so when you think about outbound sales, are you creating any curiosity? Because if you're not creating curiosity, the person's just going to delete your message or ignore the message or just be annoyed that here you are, just another person showing up, telling them what's wrong with them and why they have a problem and why they should hire you. To me, it's like giving somebody 1,000 paper cuts and saying, oh, bless your heart, you're bleeding. I sell Band-Aids. It's like, well, I'm bleeding because you cut me and I'm not going to buy your Band-Aids, right? So I think you have to create some curiosity. And then from the curiosity, the person should be leaning in going, what does that mean? Or tell me more about that. Or I'm wondering if this is something I would benefit from. If you don't have people leaning in and wanting to know more, then you really don't have permission to sell to them. And you shouldn't be selling to them because they're not going to buy from you. Why would they?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. And that's why I say whenever people are coming to you, they already have that curiosity or at least that exposure to where once you start educating them, they become more curious. But then you're talking about the staircase. How does that work then when it is outbound? What are some of those tips and tricks to create some of that curiosity on some of those calls? Yeah,
one of the easiest ways to create curiosity is, well, I'm going to say 2. It's asking questions. So one of the things that people often don't even think to do in an email is ask a question. So people treat email like it's just my job to word vomit on you. So I'm just going to talk at you in email. But that's not interesting to a reader, especially a reader who doesn't have any knowledge of you. So you need to ask questions that allows for their brain to want to answer. So our brains are like Google. Just like if you go to Google right now and you type in anything, doesn't matter what it is, Google is going to try to give you an answer. Our brains are the same way, but that only happens.
Mine's not.
Okay. Okay, Adam.
Mine can't go that
Adam,
fast.
You're so special. Who knows what's going on, but I'm sure it's something wonderful in your brain. And when you can ask questions, it allows for the brain to want to answer and come up with an answer. Now, whether they actually respond to your message or not, that's another kind of step there. But ask questions. I got an email this morning, just actually right before I got on this podcast with you guys, where this person was just telling me, like, this is who we are. He introduced himself. Then he tells me about his company. And then he tells me what he would like to do for my company. That's not interesting to me. I don't know him. But if he had approached it from the standpoint of like, I'm reaching out to ask, is this something that you would value having a conversation around? Now I can decide like, oh, well, okay, what does this mean? Or is this something that maybe I could benefit from taking part in? But telling me what you would like for me to do and what you would like for you to have happen for us when you don't have a relationship, that's not interesting to me as a reader. So learn how to ask questions and you will find people will answer them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I delete them both.
Okay.
So, so how does that work from like, and I get it from like the marketing standpoint. So are you suggesting like, it's probably better to be in person, right? Or on a video call or a conference where you can kind of have that compelling message? Or are you saying, no, it's okay to like have this interaction or try to create this? Because I get kind of both. I get this is what I'm going to do for you. And you're right. I'm absolutely like, that's a fast delete. And then I get the one that's more of like posing a question. And I do actually read those because I'm like, what's going on here? But then I usually still am like, I'm not self-diagnosing that as being a problem. Now, maybe that's just me in that particular exchange. And maybe if that was a problem, maybe I would be more apt to respond to it. But I think the other challenge these days is I get 12 of those a day. You know what I mean? So if it was like a unique message then, or a unique solve, then maybe, that would be something. But these days I get 10 or 15 of those on LinkedIn a day and a bunch of them via email every day. So I just kind of get used to just, deleting those things because I'm just like, yeah, here's another one, delete.
Yeah.
So how do you get around that kind of because everybody just has that too much in there.
The easiest way to warm up your cold calls, which is the way that I find most people hesitate to do, and yet it's the easiest way to open doors, is to utilize your network and ask people that know you, who believe in you, who are comfortable with who you are and what you bring to the table, if they would be willing to make an introduction on your behalf. Because I am pretty sure, you tell me, Adam, because we just met, but chances are if Tom sent you a message and said, hey, Adam, I want to introduce you to my friend, Nikki. She's doing some stuff and I'm wondering if it's something you would find value in your business. You're probably going to at least maybe give me a little bit of a chance to try to pique some curiosity. Like, you may decide to get on a call with me, or maybe you'll have an email exchange with me. And that's because you have rapport with Tom. So I get to ride the coattails of whatever Tom's rapport is with you, whatever his credibility is with you, if he's willing to make that introduction on my behalf. And this is it's that thing that often people are like, oh, I feel weird asking people. Well, sure. You shouldn't, because it feels nice to do nice things for people that you like. Like, if you ask me right now to make an introduction on your behalf, when I get nothing out of it, but I like you, so I would happily do that for you. And I would feel good if it turned out that the person I introduced you to, that you guys formed some kind of a relationship that benefited each other. I get those, the good feelings from it. And it doesn't cost me anything. It's just a tiny little bit of, like, it's a blip in time to send an introduction that may open a door that I could never open on my own, and vice versa, right? So ask your network if they're willing to make introductions. And I don't mean sending out a generic message to 500 people saying, will you introduce me to everybody who needs accounting services? No. Be selective, hand pick people one at a time, and be specific on who you want them to introduce you to. So if you're saying, we offer fractional CFO services, and I noticed that you have a connection on LinkedIn to so-and-so, and it doesn't look like their business is using fractional CFO services, would you be willing to introduce me and see if there's an opportunity for us to work together? Chances are that person's going to be like, sure, no problem.
Yeah. No, I would, and I would definitely give. I mean, as long as it wasn't Tom referring it, it was somebody else.
I made a bad pick.
I would definitely make that connection, and I would hear you out, for sure. And so I agree. I mean, so that's a great tip to kind of get through, some of those barriers, because some of that stuff is uncomfortable or feels weird throwing out, just tons of messages into the abyss. So being more strategic with how you're asking for those things makes a ton of sense.
And I like the investment, because what I'm hearing you say is the shotgun approach. People see that, at least I do, right? I get messages from people I've never heard of, and they'll mention, like you said, how about if people ask me, do I want to sell the firm? And I'm like, you obviously don't know me because I don't own the firm. I can't sell the firm. So you get these kind of messages like, okay, you're not on target for doing those kinds of things that are there. But that specific approach, like, I know you, I've done some work, I can see how that would help. The asking questions, and I assume that also translates into the conversation, that when you're starting that conversation with someone, is that right? I would assume that would be one of the big approaches, is not dive in and say, hey, let me tell you all the ways I'm going to solve your problem from the beginning.
Yeah, asking questions. And so in the selling staircase, the step 3 is what I call the discovery step. And chances are, it sounds like with you guys, the way where your leads are showing up is kind of at step 3, like they're in that discovery process.
Mhm.
So in the discovery process, the objective is not to sell. The objective is to understand the need and ask really smart questions that plants seeds for the other person in the conversation to start to go, oh, Tom knows some things that I need to know, or he's probably the right person that can help me with my business, just based on the way he's asking questions. So your questions should be strategic. You should have a set list of questions that you ask, and you should get through the set list of questions. One of the mistakes people will make is they'll ask a question, the prospect will answer, and they'll start selling. And then they'll ask another question, and the prospect will give an answer that might tweak what they would have sold in the first place. So then they sell something else. And now you start to overwhelm and confuse people. But if you keep it really clean, I always say, like, don't muddy the waters. Keep it clean, get through your set list of questions. And once you have an established, like, okay, I can see a pattern here, or I can see some ways that we can work together, don't launch into a sales pitch, ask permission. So I usually would say to somebody, based on what you've shared so far, I see some ways that we might work together.
One of the things that I'll ask new consulting clients is around how they spend their time. I've got a tool that looks at it as a percentage, but I also look at it more qualitatively as well. And specifically, I'll ask, what do you thinking on a day-to-day basis? What do you love doing? What do you hate doing? And what are the things where maybe you don't love it, but you're okay doing it, kind of thing? It's not the urgency to get rid of it, but if you could, that's ideal. And importantly, with agencies where there are multiple owners, each person will answer those questions. And so as I'm doing my analysis, and you can do this on your own, of course, too, I'm comparing, okay, what do people like doing? What do they not like doing? What are the opportunities for quick wins to get the unliked things off their plate? But also looking, is there overlap or is there lack of overlap? For instance, worked with an agency earlier this year where there were 2 owners, and both said they really did not like doing sales. It's like, all right, that's okay, but someone is going to have to do sales. And it turned out that for them, the thing they liked least was dealing with time waster, unqualified prospects at the very early stage. Like, they liked doing later stage closing, consultation and closing conversations, but didn't like dealing with, people who are just flaky. And I said, you can delegate that to a more junior team member. You can have them do the initial screening, whether it's via email on a form or something else, or maybe going to a call. And then you're only on the phone or only on a video call with someone who is theoretically qualified. So that can be a good interim step. If you don't like sales, get someone else doing the baseline qualifying. I do that. As an advisor, I don't hear about people until my team has pre-vetted them.
Yeah, I love that idea, Carl. A question I would have for you is when you flip it over to the selling side, when you get to the point where you've got somebody looking to buy, does that help the deal if you've got somebody that's part of that selling process, or do they still look and say, you know what, Carl's the man, he's the one, he's the reason why we actually have the sales meeting?
We'll let him come back and start over. You have to re-ask your question, Jody, because we lost you.
Actually, we didn't lose me, but I just went to the backstage. So the question is, when you have somebody helping out with the sales process, and you're looking at the end game, where you've got a buyer that's looking to buy you, of course the valuation is going to be determined if you're part of that process, if you are that process, whatever that might be. Do you find that really plays a big role in the buyer's head if you're still part of the process, even though you're not in the entire process, or do you think it's actually more of a benefit because then the buyer knows that, hey, somebody else could easily slide in and close that deal because you've got a lot of the initial work out of the way?
Some of that depends on the buyer's goals. Some acquirers of agencies are looking for ways to slot your revenue into their team. Maybe they're doing some sort of accretion, some sort of a roll up where, maybe you've got 5 million in revenue and they've got 10. Well, put the businesses together. Now you've got 15, and they can probably cut some expenses. And if they're building a roll-up kind of thing, and the goal is for you to continue being involved, you don't have to be as optional because you're still going to be part of the new business. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if your goal is to retire completely or move on to something else entirely, then being more optional is helpful. I mean, in terms of what's attractive to the buyer, everyone's going to be unique. I would say that all things considered, the more modular the business is, rather than relying on one person or two people, that gives you some more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. Just thinking through it, I think it probably even makes it easier to make the sale because you got that other person that's heavily involved in the sales process. Because I know when we looked at selling our company, that was a big question to ask.
Yeah.
What if you go away? Are you still going to bring in the revenue? And it's like, well, yeah, of course. We got this engine built up behind us. I'm just simply there to look good or close the sale, whatever you might want to call it.
Yeah.
I'm not the reason that the sale gets closed, and I think that's a big distinction between the two. And it sounds like, I 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So, question on kind of what you talked about there. I think it's a really cool concept of people coming in and saying, "Oh, I don't like sales," and then you drill down into it and be like, "Well, actually, you just don't like this first step of sales, or you don't like this last step of sales." How would you have someone do that on their own? Of like, is it starting detailed and spanning out, or starting wide and then going into the details? Like, how would you decide whether you don't like a whole process, or is there just certain parts that you don't like, where if you got rid of these steps 1 and 2, it'd be easier for you?
So when thinking about, obviously, like we've now built a system, we've created an identity as a sales team. What sort of things need to happen in presentation in order to either increase? Because I think you could have the best system in the world, but if you're not presenting it properly, you're not properly. And I love the way you talked about it earlier, where we're looking at things and outcomes. Like, if we can get away from our clients seeing us as a cost and them seeing us as an investment because we're presenting our value properly, we're going to increase the odds that we're going to have a successful outcome with them. What sort of things are you looking for in presentation?
You mean I'm in front of the client and they're asked, they want to work with us, and we start presenting what we do? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So the first step is don't present. Don't present. I see still agencies presenting 10 minutes, 5 minutes. 1 minute is too much. So I show you what I do in order to not present, because I like to talk. And if you ask me, hey, how can you double my revenue? My natural impulse would be to talk for an hour. And that's the wrong thing, right? We measure talking time in the sales cost because, Zoom, etc., they have AI meanwhile. So you can live see. And our goal is to be below 31% speaking time. So we track that, and in the weekly sessions, we talk about it. If anybody is below 31%, let's talk. And my helper, so if you're like me and you talk a lot, my helper is to have a list of questions in front of me and to have my talking points literally in front of me. So here are my talking points for the people watching. It's called repeatable sales. It's 8 steps of every agency sales. But here are my personal talking points and favorite questions. Because it should never feel like a script, but it should always have talking points. And the important thing when we coach is you never jump like from step 4 to step 5 without making sure that you have validated. So each step has an assumption and the validation. For example, you talk about the scope of work, then you talk about the budget. Scope of work, all right, what are the deliverables? And then there is budget stage, step 5. In budget, there are 2 steps. Your assumption, what their budget is, so what they want to invest. And then there is the validation that that's their budget. You don't move to the next step, which is statement of work, before you have validated their budget. And there is a whole system how you extrapolate their range before you say any price. Because sometimes you can go much higher with the same thing. So you have to wait until you know the real budget, and then you will say the price. And sometimes it will be double the price of what you said to the other guy one day before, because they just have more budget. And that's fine. So you explore the range. And how do you explore the range is that you make an assumption about what they are able and willing to spend, but then you validate the assumption. So in the CRM for agencies, we literally have two different columns. And the one says budget estimated, and the other one said budget validated. And you are allowed to move it to step 6 only after you have validated the budget. Is an example. We double clicked into one of those 8 steps to show you how seriously we take each step of the conversation. And because if you learn it once, those 8 steps, then it will be a natural flow. It goes like domino. Wow, you closed it in one? How did you close 25K in one call? I said, I just did the 8 things that I always do. It's a natural flow, and you have them lead, and you help them decide, and you help them buy. You don't sell. In our method, you don't sell anything. You help them buy.
And that's
the shrink. That's the shrink. Yeah.
And we'd say something very similar to our team, which is the really, really good ones are able to ask questions without asking questions. Like if you can get to a point where you're able to glean the information that you need through a conversation versus having what feels like a scripted set of questions, that's the magic where you're able to kind of get through those 8 steps without them realizing that you're going through the 8 steps.
The more natural, the better.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is if you skip one of those, you will get ghosted.
Oh, yeah.
You will hear, I have to talk about this with my partners. You will hear, oh yeah, sounds great. Let me come back to you. Which is, it's over. That's game over.
Yeah.
Kind of like you talked about is a lot of it goes back to that first stage, is those proposals and how can you get them out the door quickly and sign quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So as you said, you're a process person. So give us your Halloween candy approach to getting a fast proposal out the door.
Yeah, I love that. So I would say the biggest thing, I'm just going to go straight for the jugular. I'm going to do my best tip. And where I see a lot of agencies or even professional services companies, they don't do this. The biggest thing is creating a product catalog. Okay, there's a lot to proposals. You know, your team, case studies, testimonials, your terms, all that kind of stuff. But at our agency, the biggest thing was, our prices and our services change between our proposals. Everything else is pretty static. How do I create a system so that I can generate a scope of work as quick as possible? And the solution is creating a catalog, I believe. So a lot of, professional service providers, agencies don't think this way. They're grabbing a line item from this proposal, they're writing another line item from scratch, and they're Frankensteining them all together. When you create a catalog, there are just so many, I don't know how long you want me to go on this, but there are so many benefits. Just to name 2. I was able to hire a full-time salesperson and get myself entirely out of the sales process.
Which is the dream, by the way, of every client that I work with.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is. And it seems so hard because, as a digital agency, you're thinking, man, the stakes are so freaking high. We were talking about in the green room here about scope creep. It's like scope creep is an issue when the CEO is creating the proposal, let alone a salesperson who's generally going to be non-technical.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can create a catalog, all of a sudden your salesperson, they just need to be a good listener. They need to understand the catalog, and they need to be able to put things together. They wanted a blog. They wanted an About Us page, a home page. Maybe they wanted some ongoing SEO. And if they can just grab those line items that have been defined in a comprehensive way already, and then add them to a proposal, everything starts to change. It becomes you can break through to that next side in agency life.
And I can tell you again, we're not an agency, but we are a service provider that has that exact sales process in place, right? So we have a very rudimentary spreadsheet that we could have built in a couple hours that we use to do our sales. And like you said, it has a catalog in there, and we have the conversations with our prospective clients. And within an hour of that call, people walk out knowing what their prices options are, A, B, C, D, and they walk out of it. And I can tell you from being on hundreds of those calls that it is such a difference maker. It is such a difference maker for people to walk out and know exactly what the pricing can be, what it's going to look like. And oftentimes it's like, oh, this is too expensive for us. And that's great. I'd rather come to that conclusion on day one than 4 months from now in the sales process. Right. And so I think it's been a game changer for us. And it's definitely our philosophy is that anybody in our company can sell, because all you have to do is know how to use a spreadsheet.
Right. Yeah, and things come together so quickly. I remember at my agency, I would always tell my team, like, we've got to get back to people quickly, because 2-3 days of delay, because it takes you, so long to create a scope of work or proposal, could be the difference between them engaging with one of your competitors and building a lot of rapport, right? Like they're loving it, and then you finally submit your proposal. It's kind of old news. Now you're going against the grain, and you're trying to, you're on the defense a bit. And another big one is, digital agencies, professional service companies, they hate writing proposals because of the fog, right? Just like, I sit down, I've got 15 minutes between these two meetings, like I'm super stressed out, and it's like, I'm just sitting there and with a blinking carrot, and I don't know what to do. When you have a catalog, a catalog is a fog killer. Right? It all of a sudden brings clarity. They wanted this. I add that line item to the proposal. That line item already has a lot of thought put into it. Restrictions, limitations, what's included, configurations or upsells. Like, to have all that and to be building a system like that ongoing, proposal writing can darn near be fun, I would venture to say.
Wow. The other thing I like about that catalog approach is it feels like, especially if you're thinking about founder type people, creating and then delegating that down to other people, I would imagine that catalog makes it a lot easier for you as the founder to maintain your brand promise in a way that you are comfortable with, because you've already defined the parameters. You don't have to think about it. It's already baked in.
That's the key, Joey. And so the idea, what we did, and what I suggest, is the CEO or leader, some leader at the company who has authority, is the architect. Okay, they're creating templates, they're creating line items and fleshing things out, and they're setting the parameters, because that's the risky business. The salesperson is just simply adding them, and then maybe adjusting. If it's small, maybe it's fine. They have a little bit of room. If it's seismic, then they need to get approval. I got to a point where I didn't even have to approve my sales guys' proposals. I mean, after a couple of years of doing this, I just said, you got it. Like, because I knew, like, unless you change something big, you need to tell me that. Okay. But otherwise, he's just playing with the twigs or the leaves, right? He's not actually adjusting the trunk. And so it's like, look, I got a lot of fish to fry. I don't need to quabble over something that could change, $100 of profitability. I trust you. Go for it.
Yeah, you've got like a little buffer in there where you're like, this is your margin of error that I'm like completely comfortable with. Inside those parameters, I'm going to get out of the way.
Right. Yeah. And try training a salesperson without a catalog.
Yeah. Good luck.
If you could just read over the last 10 years of my emails and every recording I've ever had, and then just mimic me, then it'll be great. No, you can't. Like, they need to understand your services and the things that you sell, and a catalog is a great way to do that.
I think that what I'm curious with with your tool is, one of the things that we know with our Excel spreadsheet is we are making adjustments to it all the time. So just a couple days ago, I was looking back at one of our clients that's been with us for 3 or 4 years, and I was looking back at their original pricing tool, and I was like, oh wow, this thing is way different than the one we're using today. And that's because we learn that the AP process needs 3 different levels versus just 1 level, because it can be so complicated. And I think that's something that we've constantly had to do, is every time we get burnt on the backside, and we'll talk about scope creep in a second here, but anytime we get burnt on the backside, we go in and look at it and be, okay, what in the pricing conversation could have made it so we wouldn't have got burnt? So how does your tool work in terms of making those adjustments and adding more items to the catalog?
Yeah, well, Jamie, I think you're reading from my notes. I haven't had anyone for a long time say it quite like that, because that's almost exactly how I say it. I know how hard it is running an agency, and it's just when you're dealing with people, there's so much room for problems and challenges. What I advise agencies is take that pain. I feel you. I'm there with you. Take that pain and channel that energy towards fixing your process so that can never happen again, or at least it's massively mitigated. And so, with a little bit of detail about my product, I don't like to talk about a ton on these podcasts, but Smart Pricing Table helps you create really solid scope of work documents and proposals. And part of how we do that is there's individual proposals, but there's templates and then line items as well. And I say that's your system. Okay. When you're creating proposals, you're executing. When you're working on your system, you're investing in your business. And so what I'd say, as an example, maybe you sell a blog and you sell it for $1,000 as a part of a website package. And you find out that you literally made like $25 an hour, which is agency minimum wage, right? You go back and you say, okay, where did we leave ourselves open here? Okay, maybe I need to clarify the layouts that are included and even specify what's not included. Or in our product, like on a blog line item, you could have upsells like author bio pages or related blog posts. And each of those have a little price and the customer can just click on them. And so defining some of those opportunities and then checking your base costs. But if you don't have a repository, if you don't have a catalog, you can't do that. You're just hoping that you remember next time or you have it written down. But again, that just goes back to the whole mental fog and anxiety with the process.
Well, I love thinking about it from that perspective. And the other thing too that I'd love to get your thoughts on is in those pricing tools, building in some dependencies. Like I'm thinking about ours in particular, where we have, it's kind of it can be a la carte or very much a package deal, but there are certain things in our product offering that we've decided you can't do this without also having this, because they're so related that if one is chosen without the other, we can't provide the brand promise. So I think that's the other challenge that I would challenge agencies to think about, is not just building in those things that they can check, but also thinking about, well, does it make sense for someone to be able to have a blog without also having an author bio page? If those two from a deliverable perspective are so interrelated.
Right. I agree. Yeah, you never want to make something mission critical optional.
Agreed.
Great. Yeah. So curious. Let's go down the scope creep path a little bit. And I think what we're finding from a lot of our discussions with our clients, and I'm sure you're hearing this as well, is with the way the economy is and with what agencies are seeing right now, is everybody wants more and wants to pay less. And so I think a big part of that is in how you price. And I've talked to clients about this all the time, is like, okay, if you want to avoid scope creep, you have to make your pricing conversation as clear as possible. So that's always a tip I give. I'm curious, what are some tips that you can give to kind of make sure that scope creep isn't happening and clients aren't always trying to push those lines?
Yeah, I'd say one of the big analogies or ideas that I go over a lot is build a fence around your work. A lot of agencies, there's a mean acronym in our industry. I think it's PITA or PITA. And the reality is that we're often the pain in the butt, right? And because it's like you're getting irritated at your customer. It's like you didn't even describe what you were doing. There's a saying, I cannot figure out who said this, but I use it all the time. But if there's a fog, or if there's a mist in the pulpit, there's a fog in the congregation. And the point there is stop assuming your freaking customers know your world like you do. And if you don't know what you're offering, they have no stinking clue, right? And so when it comes to scope creep, like for instance, I like spelling this out with an example. Let's say you offer Facebook social media management. Okay, one way you can sell that is you can say, we'll manage your social media for $1,500 a month, and I will take care of everything for you. You're basically courting disaster and practicing not making friends with some kind of setup like that. But imagine instead on that line item for Facebook social media management, you said, we'll manage a Facebook page for customer. Work includes, and then I like to break it down into a bulleted list, 10 posts per month. Okay. 24-hour turnaround time needed for post approval. We're going to do two sets of them, right? So you're spelling everything out. And then does not include images, or at least does not include stock images. Like maybe we'll do some free ones or something like that. Okay. So what you've done there is you've built a fence around your work, and you have handles you can grab onto. And then what I like doing, and this is where Smart Pricing Table is just so different in the market, but I like doing things like, okay, do you want additional posts? That's a configuration inside the line item. So you can turn that on, and you can specify a quantity, and the agency owner can say it's $150 per additional post. Okay. Would you like stock images? That's an additional, $500 a month, like maybe like iStock high quality images. Well, what you've done there is you've provided clarity on the base offering, and the configurations make it clear when that something's not included if you didn't check it, right? And that's all part of the signed contract. So that goes, the scope of work goes with the terms, goes with everything else. And so they come to you and they say, actually, another one, I'd have an upsell on there for comment interactions. A lot of people who would engage in a service like that, they're not thinking about that. And little did you know they would have paid for that, right? So put that as an upsell. But if they're frustrated because they have all this work, you can point back to it and you say, I understand that, and we're happy to help with content or comment interactions, but it's just not included in our base cost. And you can see we offered you that and you didn't select it, right? And you diffuse it simply. But if you didn't talk about it at all, now all of a sudden you have a challenge.
Joe, the thing I like about that the most is you remind me a little bit of our COO Adam Hale, where he's told me on multiple occasions where he's like, yeah, everything we've done, we've made all the mistakes before, and we're going to learn from them. And when you were saying that about the common interaction, I was like, man, I would have never thought to put that in SOW, and all I could think of was you had to learn that lesson the hard way at some point, either through a lost opportunity or someone assuming that and you eating the cost, and that just was horrible for you. And
yeah,
I really just wanted to admire that piece of the puzzle, because that is a skill, is learning how to learn from that mistake and build it into the turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah. And that's so this is the full thought, right? So that happens. Life sucks. You do the comments anyways because you didn't communicate and you want to keep the customer, right?
Right.
So you do the comments, but then you go to your template, you go to that line item, and you add an upsell for it. Okay. You're happy to do it. You're having conversations with yourself, and you're like, I hate responding to comments. No, you don't. You hate responding to comments without getting paid. But if the number was right, you might actually love it. Maybe it's your highest margin thing in the future because you can outsource it to a low paid person, right? Like an entry level person. And so you take that pain, that frustration, and you go back and you say, I'm not going to do this again. There are lots of pitfalls, and no agency is perfect. But if I keep doing that, I will. You're gonna have so much smooth sailing. And it really, for us, what that equated to, we were number 2 on Clutch.co for web design companies for multiple years. In fact, we were number 1 for like 3 months. And it wasn't just paying for it. We had the reviews to vouch for it as well.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website, summitcpa.net, to get more tips and strategy for achieving business success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.